Here we go. Welcome to Love in Action, a podcast produced by the Social Justice Committee of the First United Methodist Church of Westfield, New Jersey. Joining us today is Hillary Walsh, an immigration attorney in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona. And we're going to speak to Hillary about immigration, the challenges that immigrants face, and touch upon some of the things that are going on in our nation right now. Immigration is obviously in the front of a lot of people's minds, and we're here to have a discussion about that, hopefully to dispel some myths and give people some ideas on what they can do to help our neighbors and our immigrant neighbors in our community. So we'll begin with welcome, Ms. Walsh. Thank you very much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. The honor is mine. Thank you so much.
Now, Hillary, you don't mind if I call you Hillary, do
Please do. Please do.
you? Hillary, what brought you to the practice of immigration law? It is not one of the more our members may not be familiar with, our viewers may not be familiar with immigration law. What drew stop me? Hillary, what attracted you to the practice of immigration law?
Well, I'll give you the cliff notes because, of course, every story kind of like my whole life led to that moment. And I feel like I was born in the year that I was born so that I could be an immigration lawyer in an era where immigrants need me. So I think that I really believe that it's my like ordained purpose in my life. But what really drew me to it was the idea that I could help people on an international scale right here in the country that I love, defending the Constitution, this document that all of us love so much and makes the United States so special. And as an attorney, I get to help keep families together where, I mean, not every area of the law you're fighting to separate something, but a lot of times when you're helping a family get divorced, you're separating a family and doing your most gentle way possible. If when I first started practicing, I was a civil litigator, and so I was fighting over money and contracts. And if you're doing criminal defense, you're fighting against the government, trying to keep someone from being wrongly convicted. I love the idea that I get to keep families together, and that's something that's very healing for me in my life.
What kind of cases does your firm generally handle? Well, first, let me ask you this. Does your firm specialize solely on immigration law, or do you have a varied practice?
We only do immigration law, and even within immigration law, there are only a couple of ways that you can immigrate to the United States. It's usually through when we think of like the Elon Musks of the world, everyone's, because of immigration law and because of Elon Musk's visibility right now with the administration, it's easy to use him as an example. But he immigrated to the United States first through being a student, came as a, intending to leave, but eventually was able to stay through business opportunities. So you as a business owner, business owners can help people come to the United States, work lawfully and get their green card. There's also a lottery where you literally put your name into a lottery and they like spin it and they draw you out. You can immigrate to the United States that way. That's much more rare. And then you have family and humanitarian. So family is exactly what you're thinking of, where if you're a US citizen and you want to petition for your parents or your spouse or your sibling, you can immigrate to the United States that way. But then there are also a subset within all of these areas of humanitarian, where for humanitarian reasons, we're going to allow you to stay in the United States. And that's the area that I specialize in, although I do a lot of family-based petitions. So let me tell you a little bit about humanitarian. If you've been trafficked in the United States, sex trafficked or labor trafficked, modern day slavery, you can get a T visa, and a T visa puts you on a path to a green card here in the United States because you've helped report this to law enforcement, and you're really trying to help law enforcement reduce the incident of trafficking. If you've been a victim of a violent crime, like an armed robbery, or you've been shot at, or God forbid, you've actually been shot, and you help law enforcement go after the bad guy in that scenario. You can get what's called a U visa. And then there's also violence against women, the Violence Against Women Act, which also applies to men, where if your family member has caused you extreme cruelty or battery, they've either hit you or they've verbally abused you, essentially. You can also get status that way because obviously that person, they could petition for you, but instead they are being abusive of you. And so there's essentially like the government is recognizing that you should be able to bypass this abusive person and still be able to get status. So those are the kind of the three areas that I most commonly do in my firm.
Now, a lot of people have the impression that that the border, there's just chaos at the border. And since Arizona is on the border, can you give us an idea of what a typical day is on the border? What is actually happening at the border? If I went to the border right now, would I just see throngs of people rushing into the United States? Or what would I see? Or what would most people experience at the border right now?
We have a lot of people who illegally enter the country. We do every single day, and people are apprehended. I think there's a variety of reasons that people illegally enter the country. The main subset of people who I represent who have illegally entered the country are people who are here to seek asylum. And that's a whole debate about whether that process is being abused or not. I have never found a single client who's just entering the country and then claiming asylum, who's come and sought help from a lawyer. So in any event. So we do have that. That is something that happens every day. I don't think that you could sit and just watch it like from your car where it's like, oh, I'm just seeing like throngs of people. I think people imagine something akin to the old Black Friday days where it was like you open up a Best Buy and there's all these people pushing to get through the doors and people are getting trampled. It's not like that because the border across the whole southern part of the United States is so large. So it's not like people are just pouring in, but we do have people every single day who are illegally entering the country. And sadly, a lot of people are trafficked along the way. And a lot of people die on the journey. So we have to ask ourselves, I know this is a social justice podcast, so I hope it's okay that I kind of add to the conversation in this way. But for me, my question is always, why would someone risk their life of walking across a desert? What are they leaving behind? And that's the place of curiosity I wish more people would engage in because it really helps us see the human, not the shock factor. It helps us see the human of why would you, there's a beautiful poem. I'm sorry that I can't remember it off the top of my head, but there's a beautiful poem that talks about no one gets in a boat to leave unless you're, facing serious harm at home. And this was someone I think that wrote it about fleeing Syria and possibly dying in the Mediterranean Sea, which so many people have done. But there's the functional equivalent here in Arizona of the desert, where lots of people pass away in the desert on their journey trying to flee something.
Now, how have recent changes in immigration policy impacted the work that your firm does, and how has it impacted your clients?
Well, the conversations right now are very fear-based. And I think that anytime that we're operating from a place of fear, that is not the place that, that's not a place of the Holy Spirit. That's not a place that God's put into us. That's something different. So I think that when we start operating from a place of fear, even when it is, how to put this, even when we need to enforce the rule of law in the United States, we can do it in a way that doesn't make people frightened for their own safety and security. And right now, I think that the recent policy changes where ICE is now allowed to go into schools, into hospitals, and into churches. From what I have been able to tell, we haven't seen ICE go into a lot of schools. I do have information from other immigration lawyers that they have had ICE show up at schools and seek to enter, but they've not been able to actually talk to anyone or apprehend anyone who they were allegedly there for. But when we have that kind of fear, imagine being an undocumented parent and knowing you're going to get in trouble if you don't send your kids to school because then they would be truant and possibly taken away from you by like child services. Where if you go and you take them to school and you stand in the school pickup line, you could be arrested that day in front of your child and how traumatizing that would be. Meanwhile, not knowing if you can go to work to simply put food on the table. So all of this creates a significant amount of fear for undocumented people and for particularly for people of color, because they're presumed to be immigrants and not be, and I'm putting it in air quotes for people who can't see it, from here. Because there is a very negative stereotype, but there is a stereotype in a lot of people's minds still to this day that if you are white, you are American. But if you are not white, then you're from somewhere else. And that's a really damaging stereotype that we're seeing play out in some of the fear tactics that are happening with ICE going around.
Now, along those same lines, one of the things that really, and I try to correct it every time I hear it, why is the term, or let's tell people why the term illegal alien is so offensive and so incorrect for the most part.
So I think the most offensive is just calling someone an illegal or the illegals. Um, Alien is the actual proper term when we talk about immigration law. So alien is the word that's referred to anyone who is not a US citizen in any of our immigration laws. So the technical term, although I don't like it, and there was a trend toward changing that term to non-citizen because they work the same, but they don't evoke like the image that you and I get in our mind of like the triangular shaped head with the big eyes that is an alien, like that we would think of an extraterrestrial person. Um, that trend has changed, and the new administration is saying that we're going to use alien and we're going to stop calling people non-citizens, and it's because it's an outdated term. It's a really outdated term. So in any event, the problem is calling people as a group illegal. You've probably heard it before, and I'll just repeat it, but no human can be illegal. You can be a criminal. You can have committed crimes. You can be an accused person. You can be unlawfully present. You can be illegally here, where it is illegal that you are currently here. But as a human being, like if you didn't, Rodney, if you didn't file your taxes, that would be illegal. You are required by law to file your taxes, but you would not be an illegal. Calling someone by a violation of law, civil or criminal, calling someone that name and referring to them in the masses dehumanizes people. And that's why we really need to be careful when we use that term. It breaks my heart when clients will come in and I'll ask them what their status is in a consultation, and there is a look of shame in their eyes when they say, I'm an illegal. And they have taken on this really dehumanizing term, and they have told themselves that they are that thing. We've seen this through history, and we're better than that. We have the vocabulary and we have the skill. Now, do we care enough, and do we have the character, and do we have the value system as Americans to stop using dehumanizing terms?
Well, while I think we have the capacity. It's the challenges, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you. I don't think you couldn't have put it any better. And I appreciate that. Now, have you faced any particular challenging cases uh, that kept you up at night, and how did you approach them, and how did you resolve them?
I'm trying to think of which one to tell you stories about, because
Right,
story time, there's like so many. I
right.
think one of the most, I have two brothers who I represent, and I've become very close to both of them. They're from Afghanistan and lived in a refugee camp. These are grown men, they're my age. They lived in a refugee camp during I don't remember which war or what issue we were having, but they were living in Pakistan in a refugee camp, got vetted and brought to the United States so that they could be refugees. And I have one of the brothers who is in ongoing removal proceedings. He, made some bad choices and got a DUI. He was speeding while he got the DUI. There's a whole host of things. None of it was significant to where he spent any time in prison or jail. So, I mean, I'm not minimizing the violation, but I'm trying to contextualize it by saying the people like judges who deal with this stuff every day didn't think that this was significant enough to put him in jail and put him behind bars. But the immigration system, even though judges keep granting him asylum and saying he should be able to stay, the government keeps appealing, saying he's not worthy of being able to stay in this country. And he's been here since he was 16 and he's got to be pushing 40. So it's those types of things that really keep me up at night, because if he's deported to Afghanistan in these conditions, he will, like, that's why immigration judges have consistently found, three different immigration judges have all found that he will be persecuted or tortured or killed if he's returned to Afghanistan. And so I have his oral argument before the Ninth Circuit. It just got set for the middle of May. And so I have that argument where it's like, I will go and present this case and it will be my last crack at it and try to win him asylum. He's protected from removal right now through something called withholding of removal. But that's a case that keeps me up at night. Meanwhile, the government's trying to denaturalize his brother. His brother became a U.S. citizen. Same brother who came with him from Afghanistan. His brother became a U.S. citizen and actually went and served in Afghanistan during the war and translated for Marines, was a translator for Marines, embedded with Marines. And now they're trying to denaturalize him. So yeah, those are the kind of things that really keep me up at night, because it's individual cases, but they have such a broad impact and their life is on the line. And so it's definitely high stakes. How I get through it is, I think the constant inquiry. I read a book a few years ago and I go back to it all the time, called The Four Agreements, and just asking myself, did I do my best? That's one of the agreements I've made with myself, where I will always do my best. And to the extent I can do better next time, that's feedback for the future. But you can't go into the past and beat yourself up for what you didn't do when at the time you were doing your best. So those are the ways that we keep on going.
Now, on the other hand, give us a success story. Give us one that just warms your heart. Um, that through your efforts, you actually impacted someone's life positively. Not that you don't do for all your clients, but give us one particular success story that really warms your heart.
Yeah. I have a friend who had worked for me for a little while in a contract basis. I didn't, when you're working with someone as a contractor, you don't need to worry about their immigration status, because you're just paying them kind of as a 1099, like, here you go, here's your contract work that you're doing. But she eventually came to me and said, "Hey, I don't have my immigration papers. Can we talk about whether you can help me or not?" And my team is really incredible. So I can't take the credit for this, but my team was able to have a great conversation with her. And they found that when she was 15, mind you, she's 37, 38 now. So 20 years ago, she came to the United States from Guatemala. She did enter illegally. Her plan was to work here for a little while, send money back to her family, and then return to Guatemala. Had no plans to stay. But when she got here, an adult man who was the boyfriend of her cousin who she was living with, made sexual advances and was trying to, and mind you, she's 15 years old. So when she told her cousin about this, the cousin didn't believe her and said that she was the one. Anyway, you can imagine how this goes.
Right. Yep.
She goes to church and asks at church, is there someone who I can live with until I get my feet underneath me so I can return to Guatemala? Someone in her church volunteers. Unfortunately, they later go on to traffic her as a labor trafficking victim. They have her basically locked in the home, taking care of all of the children in the home as a nanny. They restrict her food. She has to work 15 to 20 hours a day. And on Fridays, if she's good, they'll buy her a pizza. 20 years later, I got her papers because of this event. So there's a beautiful song that I'm not being able to think of the title right now, but it's essentially, you make beautiful things. The song is called Beautiful Things. And it is a song talking about how God takes all of these horrible things in our life and will make them beautiful. And I think that's the promise of our faith. And that's the promise that immigration law, I mean, it's messed up that you have to go through all this hard stuff to be able to get a green card. But that's what ended up working out for her. And her faith is so incredible that through this whole process, She just believed that it was going to work out. And I was like, this is a stretch. This is going to be challenging. I cannot promise you anything. I hope this doesn't damage our relationship if this doesn't work out. Her faith was something I have never seen before. The calm all over her. So yeah, those when she got to go home and see her dad, and she was driving a car, and her dad couldn't believe that she was old enough to drive, because remember when the last time she saw him, she was 15, not old enough to drive a car, and now here she is driving him around in a car, and that, like, oh my gosh, like, you just can't beat it. You
Yeah.
can't beat the work that we do when it all works out. It's so
Right.
precious.
Right. Right. And that's really important. Well, I have to take a moment right now to say you were listening to and or watching Love in Action, a podcast from the Social Justice Committee of the First United Methodist Church of Westfield, New Jersey. And we are talking to Hillary Walsh, an immigration attorney at New Frontiers in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, Hillary, how does your work intersect with understanding different cultures and different backgrounds? How do you navigate that? How do you I know you have a staff obviously, but give us an idea of how you navigate those challenges.
Well, it's always very unique when you work with folks from all over the world. I'm from Kansas, and I grew up in a very, the farm town, South Central Kansas on the Oklahoma border. Whatever you're imagining is exactly what it was. Maybe even a little bit quieter. We had in my little town I grew up in, we had one blinking stoplight. So, I mean, it was a thriving metropolis. So, not a whole lot of cultures to get to interact with. And so for me, it's always really fun. I love meeting people from all over the world. I love talking to different folks. I think that one of the gifts that I have been given in my life is I can kind of fit in anywhere, and I can have a conversation with about anyone. And that's helped me in my job. I work primarily with Spanish speaking undocumented population. So a lot of folks from Mexico, a lot of folks from Central and South America. And even within that subset, there's a ton of different cultural standards and expectations. And I also represent a lot of Indians from all over India. India is a humongous country and has its own cultural norms.
Mhm.
So, how do we deal with that and how do we work with that? I think is a lot of patience. We have to remember that people's tone of voice and their expectations and the way they talk to us can often be cultural. They're not always yelling at you. That some people have been so disempowered for so many years that they feel like they have to get really mad right away in order to get your attention, even though they didn't have to get really mad and yell and call you names before you would give them the attention that they needed. That might just be how life has taught them to get to to voice themselves.
Right.
So there's a lot of love and compassion there, balanced with laying boundaries and letting people know that this is where our boundary is, and we're not going to cross that, because otherwise we won't be able to stay in business. I'll have staff members quitting because nobody wants to get yelled at or be called names, and we have to go from there. There's a new book by Mel Robbins, and it's all about the let them theory. And I think that helps us a lot. I had not ever verbalized it or articulated it in that way. But if someone's mad at you, or if someone is saying negative things about you that you know aren't true, cultural or not, you can on some level just let them think that. It doesn't, you don't have to go around changing everyone's minds.
Right. I think that's one of the things that people should take more to heart. And not that this is relevant to anything, but I just decided the other day that I don't need to be on Facebook anymore. I can communicate with people. I'm going to force myself to communicate with people in a different way, because
Yeah,
nothing is cesspool now. Of people don't. If you and I were talking and we had a difference of opinion, we're going to interact with each other a lot different than both of us pounding on the keyboard and sending insults back and forth. It's
absolutely.
just something that I
Absolutely.
don't feel that I need anymore. But in any case, enough about that. And you mentioned a book or resources. Would that be something that you would suggest our community or our listeners read? The book that you mentioned, could you mention it again, please? The book you just
Oh,
mentioned.
Mel Robbins's book. Mel Robbins is kind of like she's, I think, an ex-attorney, but she's more of like a mindset influencer. I don't know. I haven't personally read the book, but I've listened to her podcast. She sometimes uses colorful language, so you'd have to be kind of aware recommending it to your church community. But the concept is that it's okay. And I think that, I come from a Baptist background. I don't really go to Baptist church anymore, but in any event, it's okay for people to misunderstand you if you're doing your best. It's okay if they're going to walk away and they're going to take away negative things about you, or there's just a letting go, and there's a surrender, and I'm going to continue to do my best with the tools that I have, and when I know better, I will do better. And then letting everybody else kind of do their thing. That's the thrust of her whole book. But I don't know that it's like necessarily church group friendly. I think the Four Agreements definitely is. The Four
Okay.
Agreements definitely
Oh,
is.
yes.
It's so good. And it's
Now, the
old
Four
school and has been
Agreements,
around forever.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. The Four Agreements, who is the author of that?
I
Well,
can
we can
look
look it
really.
up. Don't worry about it. I can find it. The Four Agreements, you
It's
highly
by
recommend.
Yeah, it's by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Okay. Don Miguel.
Ruiz. Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So we have that. Now we're coming to near to the end, and I just want to make sure, first of all, that you let us know things that you think are important. And what's the one message or takeaway you would like our listeners uh, to remember about immigration law and about the client base and the immigration population in the United States today? What give us a takeaway?
The immigrant population is really misunderstood. And when we look at our faith from a Christian perspective, when we look at our faith and we look at all the characters in the Bible who were really misunderstood, and that later in time they were understood. We have Paul, who was in prison. We have Jesus, who was, basically murdered by popular opinion. Imagine being Mary, pregnant, right? Pregnant and not married in that time. It's hard for teenagers today to be pregnant as a teenager and not married. Imagine all of these people who were very misunderstood. And I'm not saying that someone who's illegally here is, the savior of the world. I'm not suggesting those things. But I am saying that when we misunderstand a whole group of people, when we misunderstand an entire demographic, and then we make judgments about what's going on, and we don't know folks who are in that situation, we're really doing wrong by all the people who came before us and by all the people who are the heroes of our faith journey. We're really doing wrong by them. We should seek to understand before we make judgment. And you may come to the conclusion that your initial judgments were correct. That's okay. But my ask is sit down and have dinner with someone who's undocumented and try to find out their story. If you don't have a friend who's undocumented, that's okay. Growing up in Kansas, I sure didn't. And I had to leave and go find a whole big different world where I found a massive population here in Arizona. There are tons of people, and I know you're talking about leaving social media, but TikTok is a great place to look up people who are going through the immigration journey, and they're sharing their journeys, and you can start to really feed your empathy by learning about the plight that other people are going through. Because we don't understand how great America is already. We don't understand how great America is at this moment and why people are wanting to come here until you visit other countries. And it gives you a little bit of gratitude for what you have. You realize that there's plenty to go around. And then the other piece is I would listen to Peter Zeihan's podcast a little bit. Peter Zeihan, and let me see if I can spell his last name. Zeihan. But he's not an economist, but he all of his arguments are based on data and birth rates, and he makes lots of really unique predictions. But he has a lot of dialogue right now that's very data based about why immigration, including illegal immigration, is actually good for the American system. And so I think for the first step is challenge your belief system by getting to know someone. That's how we grow in general. And then number two is let's look at the data, not the emotion. The data speaks volumes about what we should do in our country. And then with that information, I would say get out into your midterm election and vote.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think I could add to that. I think that that's excellent. Hillary, you have been wonderful, and I really, really
Thank you.
appreciate the time that you took. But you hit on the topics that I wanted to discuss, and of course, we could go into a lot more. But I just wanted to give our audience what I really wanted to do was put the human face on our immigrant community and the people who are in our community, the people who work really hard, who pay those taxes, who do the things which I always laugh and I say that now that this mass deportation is going, all these white males who wanted to have jobs picking soybeans can now go back to picking soybeans because those jobs were being taken from Americans, which of course was never the case. But and I don't mean to diminish it at all, but I think that we will see how important our immigrant community is, and we will see very soon how important they were.
Yeah, it's
So
it's it's white people, black people, Latinos, Asian people, everyone across every demographic from a popular standpoint did not vote for Kamala Harris in enough of a 50% of any when you look at women, any of these. And so you have to wonder what is the driving factor here. And I think that people just don't feel heard. And as politicians, I was going to say it's our responsibility, but I'm not a politician. Gosh, that's a nasty business. In general, people need to feel heard, and I think they can feel heard in the church. I really do. I feel like the church, we really can create community in a church because we have traditions and a common faith background, and we have our own bylaws and our own constitution that we're going to abide by. And we can help people feel heard in the church, and they don't then have to go to the government and feel heard by the government, because then infighting happens where it's about white men and white women and black men and all of this. And that's the infighting, where what we want is let's find the common ground. And I want to hang out there. In the Venn diagram, I want to be in the messy middle.
the messy middle. I think that's a perfect place to stop. Hillary, thank you very much for your time. Good luck to you in your practice. I wish you nothing but the best. You will be in my prayers to give you the guidance and give you the strength to continue your the work that you do. And again, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was Love in Action, our podcast from the Social Justice Committee of the First United Methodist Church of Westfield, New Jersey, part 2 with Reverend Dr. Sonny Malvado will be coming up. Stop, cut. We're going to cut it right there. We're going to cut.